Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a pretty intense session.
Definitely.
We're doing a deep dive focusing on just one single source. And it's highly provocative.
That's putting it mildly.
It's a YouTube analysis from someone called Professor BlackTruth, or Prof BlackTruth, about the political fallout after Eric Adams withdrew from the New York mayoral race.
Right. Referred to throughout as Officer Eric Adams of the NYPD.
Yeah, that's consistent. And our mission, well, it's straightforward. We want to analyze and really unpack the professor's specific arguments, not just why Adams left, but why, according to this analysis, it was almost inevitable.
And we really need to set the stage here for you, the listener, right away.
Yeah.
This source material is just packed with really powerful, uncompromising language.
It's extremely charged.
Yes, extremely charged political language, sweeping statements, and, claims that are often deeply opinionated, sometimes quite aggressive. Our role here is strictly impartial. We're just focusing on conveying the unique viewpoint, the political theory that Professor BlackTruth presents, making sure you understand the argument being made without us endorsing the specific words or the claims themselves.
Okay, let's get into it then, starting with the main event, Adams' withdrawal. The official reason, as reported by the professor, was this combination of constant media speculation about my future and the Campaign Finance Board's decision to withhold millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And Adams finished his statement, hoping New Yorkers will see this city thrive under our leadership.
Right. But the professor kind of dismisses those official reasons almost instantly.
Really? How so?
Calls the withdrawal predictable, and states very emphatically that Adams won't be missed. And what's interesting is how fast the analysis shifts from the finance issues to Adams himself,
Okay.
referring to him with this deeply critical and frankly derogatory nickname, Officer Mushmouth.
Wow. And just so we're clear, using a term like mushmouth, that's obviously meant to undermine him personally, right? His perceived competence, maybe his way of speaking, positioning him as just fundamentally unfit, even beyond any legal stuff.
Precisely. That seems to be the intent. The professor claims that even setting aside the legal troubles Adams had, and I'm quoting here, other issues just being mayor alone, that made re-election look like a long shot anyway.
So the withdrawal just confirmed what the professor already thought.
Exactly. The source presents it as just confirming a pre-existing political reality for Adams.
Okay, so Adams is out. What does Prof BlackTruth say about the race now? Who's left, and what's the dynamic?
Well, the professor reports that right after the withdrawal, Manny is leading in the polls, and by a commanding margin.
How much?
Specifically, at least 20 points over the nearest competitor, and that competitor is identified by the source as the disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Right, and this is where the analysis really takes aim at the media's role, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A scathing attack. The argument is that the white media, as the source terms it, isn't just reporting the facts. They have a vested financial interest in making every big race look like a nail-biter.
To keep people hooked?
Exactly. Keep the public engaged, clicking, watching,
Right.
regardless of what the actual polling data suggests.
So the professor's view is pretty cynical about media motives.
Extremely cynical. The goal, according to this analysis, is to feed people's delusions. Painting these unlikely comeback scenarios for candidates like Cuomo, basically just for eyeballs and clicks. The professor even warns politicians who are silly enough to buy into the white media's hype about them.
Okay, and before we move on from the immediate fallout, there was one more point about Adams's support, or lack of it.
Yes, a final, very sarcastic comment. The professor expresses this mock shock that Adams's co-workers over at the local pigsty, the NYPD didn't come to his rescue.
Using the term pigsty, that's obviously intentional,
Mm-hmm.
very inflammatory.
Highly intentional. It's a historical slur for police used here to underscore a point the professor is making about systemic dynamics. The claim is these institutions rarely back up a black officer facing charges anyway, essentially suggesting Adams was abandoned by the system he was part of.
This focus on loyalty, or maybe disloyalty, leads us pretty naturally into the role of money, which the professor also discusses.
Right. And Prof BlackTruth makes this interesting assertion that money is no longer the sole determinant of winning an election. That's a key distinction.
How so? Not the sole determinant.
Yeah, it's a critical theoretical point they're making. They aren't saying money is irrelevant. They explicitly state you won't win without it. Absolutely need it.
Okay.
But the source points to Donald Trump's political longevity as the prime example. The argument goes, if the electorate is genuinely fed up with the usual suspects running for office, and the source specifically mentions the corrupt local dynasty called the Cuomos here, then having just an adequate amount of money is enough. Enough to run the campaign, get the message out. You don't necessarily need to outspend everyone else if you can tap into that real public discontent.
That's a fascinating theory. And it connects directly to how the professor views the power structure in New York City itself, right?
Directly. The claim is Adams ultimately failed because New York is fundamentally run by rich kleptocrats.
Kleptocrats.
Yeah.
Meaning billionaires.
Essentially, yes. The city's deep-pocketed billionaires who, according to the source, have been the real power brokers for much longer than any single mayor.
So if that's the permanent power structure, how does Manny, the current frontrunner, fit into this? How's he navigating it, according to the professor?
Well, the analysis suggests Manny is painfully aware that these powerful financial forces he claims he wants to challenge are not enthused about him, not at all.
And so what's he doing about it?
According to the source, he's started pivoting and ameliorating some of his more fiery rhetoric, basically toning it down.
Why? To avoid scaring off the billionaires.
That's the interpretation offered. The professor reads this pivot as Manny already dreaming of higher office, which would require a broader, less confrontational appeal down the line.
Yeah.
And this leads to a really interesting, maybe even challenging point in the professor's argument. The source warns listeners, warns you to be realistic about the way the politics actually works, suggesting that, sticking together with the wealthy class, even if you oppose them ideologically, well, that's just real politics, practical politics.
Wait a minute, though. If the big lesson the professor teaches, later we'll get to it, is that political safety comes from loyalty to your base. Doesn't this observation about Manny kind of contradict that? If Manny's already softening his message to please billionaires, isn't he, by the professor's own logic, potentially making the same mistake Adams made, alienating his original supporters?
That is the fascinating tension right there in the analysis, isn't it? The professor seems to be implicitly arguing that, at least in the current New York context, maybe a politician just can't escape the gravity of that economic power, even if playing that game means sacrificing some future-based loyalty. It's a very pragmatic, maybe cynical reading of the constraints.
Okay, let's shift now to the core of Prof. BlackTruth's most aggressive theory. The idea that Adams's political downfall was somehow pre-planned.
Right. Let's dig into how the source portrays the very beginning of Adams's political career. The professor asserts Adams basically came out of nowhere with tons of white money that nobody knew where it came from.
White money.
That's the term used. Money later identified, according to the source, as coming from shadowy foreign donors.
And this funding connects to accusations of pandering.
Directly. The professor accuses Adams of starting his career by, quote, wagging his finger at black New Yorkers with the, but what about black-on-black crime spiel?
Okay.
In the professor's view, this was all just performing and buck dancing for those white, dark money donors.
Okay, the term buck dancing there, we need to be clear, that's a deeply offensive historical term. Its use here seems intended to suggest Adams was acting subserviently for white donors, not leading independently.
Absolutely. It's very loaded vocabulary, used deliberately, it seems, to strip Adams's entire political approach of legitimacy in this narrative.
And the source is just as critical of Adams' supporters.
Equally dismissive, using some of the most inflammatory language yet, labeling them fellow bootlicks, buck-dancing preachers, and members of the Butter Biscuit Brigade.
Butter Biscuit Brigade, what's the implication there?
Well, the term seems intended to accuse Adams' black political allies of being easily bought, essentially selling out their community for trivial rewards, the political equivalent of just a butter biscuit. Again, it's language aimed squarely at demolishing their credibility.
And all of this builds towards the professor's central theory for why Adams ultimately failed.
Yes. It culminates in the core claim that white power never had any long-term plans for him. Now, we should stress, that's a powerful narrative claim. But the professor doesn't really offer concrete evidence in the analysis for this specific idea of premeditation.
Right. We're just reporting the theory presented.
Exactly. The theory presented is that Adams was only ever intended as a stopgap, a temporary measure, until someone deemed more acceptable could be found.
A placeholder, essentially.
That's the idea. The professor connects this to a broader, cynical political observation. White power doesn't put these clowns into these positions without knowing exactly how it's going to get rid of them. The assertion is that his exit was almost designed into the system from the start.
Which brings us to the political lesson. Prof. BlackTruth wants politicians to learn from all this. If Adams supposedly failed by sucking up to donors, where should political security come from?
According to the professor, true political safety isn't found by appealing to some white political donor. No. Real security comes from building deep, strong ties to the Black community so that, quote, the people are already on your side.
A loyal base.
A loyal base. That base loyalty, the argument goes, acts as a crucial shield when the media inevitably decides to take shots at you.
And this is where the analysis makes that really striking comparison, right? Contrasting Adams' alleged failure with the political survival of Donald Trump, referred to as the Orange Man.
It is a jarring shift, but it's a key part of the professor's overall argument about political strategy.
How so?
The professor sees Trump's political lifeline as his absolutely unbreakable connection to his base, whom the professor refers to, using Hillary Clinton's term, as deplorables. The core idea here, from the professor's perspective, isn't about policy. It's about managing your base effectively, no matter where you are on the spectrum.
And how does Trump do that, according to the source?
The source claims Trump never finger wags at his political base. He never lectures them. Instead, he constantly throws them red meat. And that, the professor argues, is why they've stayed loyal for a decade.
So the conclusion is?
The conclusion drawn in the analysis is that Trump, whatever his flaws, understands the game of politics far better than a lot of the Democrats do. The lesson is clear, that strong, catered-to base connection is the ultimate political survival tool. It can potentially overcome money issues, media attacks, a connection Adams allegedly never built.
And what about Adams' future? Does the professor offer any prediction?
It's a pretty bleak and mocking outlook, actually. The source doesn't think Adams will be as lucky as Bernard Kerik, the corrupt former police commissioner.
Just for context for listeners, Kerik pleaded guilty to felonies, served prison time, but managed to start a consulting business first.
Right. The professor mocks that kind of outcome as unlikely for Adams, suggesting instead that since Adams, in the professor's words, so loves licking boots so much, maybe his best second career would be as a shoeshine boy.
Wow. Just wow. That's quite the closing statement on Adams from the source.
Indeed. Extremely harsh.
Okay, that really brings us to the end of this deep dive into Professor BlackTruth's intense analysis. If we pull back, the main takeaways seem to be this distinction between adequate funding and simply outspending opponents. The potentially overwhelming power of entrenched economic forces, the kleptocrats, in NYC politics, and above all, the absolute necessity, according to this source, of cultivating that strong, loyal base connection to weather political storms.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how the professor's entire narrative rests on this idea of Adams as a kind of temporary pawn for outside forces, someone lacking that genuine power-base connection.
Right.
And then we see the professor hold up the example of the Orange Man as someone who does maintain that fiercely loyal connection, presenting that as the only real path to political security and survival today.
So that leaves us with a final thought, maybe a provocative one for you, the listener. If building and aggressively catering to a loyal base, throwing that red meat, as the professor puts it, is truly the ultimate key to political survival, as this source claims, powerful enough perhaps to overcome corruption scandals or financial disadvantages, does this mean that the essential survival strategy for any aspiring politician now requires that constant base feeding, that constant throwing of red meat, regardless of which community they aim to represent? It's a powerful, maybe even a disheartening thought about where modern politics might be headed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes, only thing that I'm worried about, punch one of these pussy ass niggas in they mouth, then they film and they'll upload. The suckers do anything for that clout. They'll trick you out of your position if you ain't gained up and you ain't here watching out. Internet bloggers, internet gangsters, who the snitches? I can't tell. On the dead homies and enemies podcast, the only podcast that I won't tell. But I ain't tripping, I just pay attention to my own little business and I get the smell. I'm in another state, making another plate. Big plat place on my state. A plush hotel, just counting mail. I do this shit and I do it well.